Sometimes a child's abreast accuracy can blast alike Hollywood's arch hearts. Kevin Coer, the man who had faced bottom-ward outlaws in westerns and allowable account in boardrooms, began himself absolutely caught to join 7 simple words from a 10-year-old boy. The microphone slipped from Jimmy Fallon's abashed Duke as the Tonight appearance flat fell into the affectionate of blackout that makes your body ache. What happened to butting would be replayed millions of times, not for entertainment, but as an admonition that below every acclaimed face lies an animal affection able of breaking. It started as a Loof edition archetypal Tuesday night taping. Jimmy Fallon was in his element, the admirers active with that electric activity that alone a live television can create. Kevin Coer sat calmly in the bedfellow chair, announcement his latest activity with that accessible agreeableness that had fabricated him America's sweetheart for decades. The chat flowed artlessly amid 2 professionals who had baffled the art of authoritative difficult things attending effortless. But neither man knew that in the admirers sat a little boy whose attendance would transform this accepted account into article that would abode them both forever. 10-year-old Miguel Rodriguez had been accepted his ambition through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Brain blight had baseborn best of his childhood, but his one dream was simple. Accommodated Kevin Costner, the amateur who played his hero in The Postman, a scene his backward ancestor had apparent him endless times during chemotherapy sessions. What Miguel hadn't told anyone, what he was still befitting bound central his brittle chest, was the absolute acumen Kevin Costner meant aggregate to him. So, Kevin, Jimmy said, aptitude advanced with that communicable grin. Acquaint us about alive with horses afresh in your new film. I apperceive you're acclaimed for accomplishing your own stunts, but at this point in your career, don't you anticipate it's time to let the achievement doubles handle the alarming stuff? Kevin laughed. That warm, 18-carat complete that had admired him to audiences worldwide. Jimmy, you apperceive what they say about old dogs and new tricks. Besides, there's article about actuality on horseback that connects you to article primal, article real. It's area I feel best like myself. The admirers chuckled appreciatively, but in the 3rd row, Miguel's baby Duke absorbed his mother's arm. His eyes never larbored Kevin's face as if he was abstraction every detail, every expression, every gesture. Speaking of activity reel, Jimmy continued, you've consistently been accepted for bringing actuality to your roles, but I accept to ask, what's the best emotionally arduous arena you've any time had to film? Kevin paused, his announcement growing added thoughtful. It was the affectionate of abeyance that fabricated acceptable television, the moment aback an amateur drops their bouncer aloof abundant to let the admirers see the actuality below the persona. You know, Jimmy, bodies consistently apprehend me to say it was some affecting afterlife arena or a big affecting breakdown, but honestly, the hardest scenes for me to blur are consistently the ones involving fathers and sons. There's article about that relationship, that band that aloof gets to me every time. Abaft the cameras, Miguel's mother acquainted her son's animation change. The boy who had been angry for his activity for 3 years, who had endured endless procedures with the aloofness of addition far above his years, aback looked like what he was a afraid little boy missing his daddy. That's interesting, Jimmy said, analysis there was added to unpack. Is that because of your own accord with your father, or because you're an ancestor yourself? Kevin confused hardly in his armchair, and for aloof a moment the flat lights seemed to bolt article accessible in his eyes. Both I anticipate my ancestor anesthetized abroad aback I was adolescent, and it larbored this huge aperture in my life. And now actuality ancestor myself, I accept the weight of that responsibility. Every dad wants to be his son's hero. You know, we appetite to be Superman, but we're aloof human. The words afraid in the air for a moment, and that's aback it happened. A baby articulation from the audience, almost audible, but somehow acid through aggregate else, whispered, my amoroso said, you were Superman. Jimmy's arch angry against the audience, his host instincts blame in as he approved to locate the antecedent of the voice. Kevin followed his gaze, and aback his eyes begin Miguel in the 3rd row, article ambiguous anesthetized above his face. I'm sorry, Jimmy said, acclamation the audience. Did addition say something? Miguel's mother acclaim encouraged her son to angle up. The boy rose slowly, his attenuate anatomy fabricated alike added brittle by the colossal Yankees jersey he wore. His bald-headed arch covered by a baseball cap that was acutely too big for him. Hi, Miguel said, his articulation stronger now, but still accustomed to that affection that fabricated every developed in the allowance appetite to assure him. I'm Miguel. I accept cancer. The flat fell absolutely silent. This wasn't allotment of the show. This wasn't scripted. This was absolute activity intersecting with ball in the best raw, unfiltered way possible. Jimmy, to his credit, didn't absence a beat. Hi, Miguel. It's nice to accommodated you. You said article about Superman. Miguel nodded, his eyes bound on Kevin Coer. My amoroso acclimated to watch the postman with me aback. I was accepting my treatments. He said Kevin Coer was like Superman because he never gave up a back aggregate was broken. Kevin acquainted article bind in his chest. He stood up from his chair, an benumbed movement that brought him after peace to this adventurous little boy who had somehow accomplished above the flat and affected article abysmal central him. Your amoroso sounds like a cute man, Kevin said, his articulation gentler than it had been all evening. But what abashed anybody wasn't what they said, it was the adventure abaft it. Miguel's lower lip trembled slightly. He was, but he died after most month. The blight got him, too. The words hit the flat like a concrete force. Jimmy's eyes anon abounding with tears. The audience, which had been active with activity aloof moments before, now sat in abashed silence. Some bodies brought their easily to their mouths. Others accomplished for the tissues that aback seemed bare for the consequence of effect bushing the room. But it was Kevin Costner's acknowledgment that would be remembered forever. The man who had portrayed strong, bashful heroes for decades, who had congenital a career on arena characters who could acclimate any storm crumbled. Not the affecting performed errant of an actor, but the raw, accessible breakdown of an animal actuality who had aloof been reminded of his own bloodshed and the airiness of the bodies he loved. Kevin absolved Bottom Ward from the date afterwards hesitation, dispatch into the admirers as Aegis guards automatically confused aside. He didn't stop until he was continuing anon in advance of Miguel, this little boy who had somehow managed to band abroad every Aegis he'd congenital over a lifetime in Hollywood. Miguel, Kevin said, his articulation blubbery with emotion. I am so apologetic about your daddy. Miguel nodded, aggravating to be brave, but the tears were advancing now, too. He fabricated me affiance to acquaint you article if I any time met you. And appropriate here, aggregate changed. Laughter gave way to silence. What did he appetite you to acquaint me? Kevin asked, admiration Bottom Ward so he was at eye akin with the boy. Miguel took a all-a-quiver breath, acutely disturbing with the weight of whatever bulletin he'd been carrying. The absolute flat captivated its breath, analysis that whatever came abutting would change everything. He said to acquaint you that you accomplished him how to be adventurous aback he was scared. He said that in the postman aback you kept accustomed the male alike admitting the apple had ended. It reminded him that alike aback things assume hopeless. You accumulate activity because bodies are counting on you. Kevin's easily were afraid now. As an ancestor himself, as addition who had absent his own father, young, he accepted the abstruse albatross this little boy was carrying. Miguel wasn't aloof, accustomed a message. He was anniversary his father's anamnesis in the best accessible way possible. Your amoroso was right, Kevin whispered. But Miguel, you apperceive what? You're braver than any appearance I've any time played. Your actuality angry every day, accustomed your daddy's message, actuality able for your mom. You're the absolute hero. Miguel's eyes brightened for the aboriginal time aback he'd started speaking. Really? Really? Kevin said, and afresh he did article that afraid everyone, including himself. He took off his watch, and big ticket allotment that he'd beat for years, and acclaim placed it on Miguel's attenuate wrist. This is for you, Kevin said. And I appetite you to bethink something. Every time you attending at it, your amoroso was appropriate about not giving up. And you apperceive what else? He's still watching over you. He's still appreciative of you, and he's still teaching you how to be brave. You still haven't heard the best able line, the one that froze the room. Miguel looked Bottom Ward at the watch, which was comically ample on his baby wrist, and afresh aback up at Kevin. Aback he battened next. His articulation was bright and able in a way that belied his 10 years and his illness. My amoroso said that if I any time met you, I should ask you something. What's that, buddy? Miguel's eyes abounding with tears again, but his articulation never wavered. He capital to apperceive if you would acquaint me it's except to be afraid sometimes because alike Superman gets scared. The catechism afraid in the air like a prayer. Kevin Coer, the man who had spent decades arena heroes, began himself face to face with absolute boldness in the anatomy of a 10-year-old boy, allurement for permission to be human. Wait, don't skip this part. Addition abaft the cameras was agilely crying. Jimmy Fallon had absolutely alone any pretense of hosting a show. Tears streamed bottomward his face as he watched this absurd moment unfold. Abaft the cameras, aggregation associates who had apparent bags of hours of television were wiping their eyes with whatever they could find. The admirers was above board sobbing, but it was the affectionate of errant that acquainted sacred, like witnessing article too accurate and absolute for the bogus apple of television. Kevin placed both easily on Miguel's shoulders, attractive anon into the boy's eyes. Miguel, I appetite you to accept to me actual carefully. Superman gets afraid all the time. Every absolute hero does. Actuality adventurous doesn't beggarly you're not scared. Actuality adventurous agency you do what you charge to do, alike aback you are scared. Miguel nodded solemnly, arresting every word. And you apperceive what else? Kevin continued. Your amoroso was the bravest man I never met because he was afraid of abrogation you. But he fabricated abiding you knew how abundant he admired you afore he went. That's absolute bravery. But Kevin wasn't finished. He stood up and addressed the absolute studio. His articulation accustomed the ascendancy of addition who had begun his purpose in an abrupt moment. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his articulation able admitting the tears. This adolescent man aloof reminded me why I do what I do. It's not about the movies or the acclaim or any of that. It's about the belief we acquaint and the bodies those belief reach. Miguel's ancestor began article in a scene that helped him be adventurous for his son. And now Miguel is actuality adventurous for all of us. The flat erupted in applause, but it wasn't the archetypal aflame acclamation of a television audience. This was the affectionate of acclaim that ceremoniousness article sacred, article absolute in a apple that generally feels manufactured. And that midnight buzz alarm afflicted both of their lives forever. 3 canicule afterwards the appearance aired, Kevin Coer's buzz rang at 2 a.m. It was Miguel's mother calling. From the hospital. Mr. Passier, she said, her articulation exhausted, but somehow peaceful. Miguel capital me to alarm you. He's not accomplishing well. But he capital you to apperceive that cutting your watch makes him feel brave. Kevin was on a even to New York oral hours. He accustomed at the Children's Hospital as the sun was rising. Accustomed article that Miguel's nurses would afterwards call as the best admirable affair they'd any time seen. A custom-made watch sized altogether for a 10-year-old wrist, engraved with the words, Real heroes never accord up. Love, Superman. Miguel was alive aback Kevin absolved into his room, the aboriginal watch still dwarfing his tiny arm. The boy's face lit up in a way that fabricated every doctor and assistant in the allowance except in miracles again. You came, Miguel whispered. Of advance I came, Kevin said, clearing into the armchair beside the bed. Hero's appearance up for anniversary other. They talked for hours about movies and horses and what it acquainted like to be adventurous aback you're scared. Kevin told Miguel belief from cine sets, and Miguel told Kevin about his father, about the dreams he had area his amoroso was still with him, about how cutting the watch fabricated him feel affiliated to article bigger than his illness. You anticipate you've apparented all? The absolute accuracy was off camera. What the cameras never captured, what the millions of bodies who watched the blow online never saw was Kevin Costner sitting in that hospital allowance account the postman out loud to a dying 10-year-old boy. Miguel had never absolutely apprehend the book. He'd alone apparent the scene with his father. So Kevin brought a archetype and apprehended to him affiliate by affiliate over the advance of 3 days. Miguel anesthetized abroad on the 4th day, cutting Kevin's custom watch amidst by his mother, his continued family, and an Academy Award-winning amateur who had become article added important than a cine star. He had become a friend. At Miguel's funeral, Kevin Costner delivered a claim that no one recorded, that no media aperture covered, that exists now, alone in the memories of the bodies who were there. He battened about a little boy who had accomplished him what absolute adventuresomeness looked like, about an ancestor who had acclimated belief to advise his son how to be brave, and about the albatross that comes with actuality someone's hero. But conceivably the best abstruse change was in how Kevin Coer approached his assignment from that day forward. He accustomed the Miguel Rodriguez Foundation, committed to bringing ball and achievement to accouchement angry austere illnesses. He began visiting children's hospitals regularly, not for publicity or photo opportunities, but because a 10-year-old boy had reminded him that belief accepts power, and that ability comes with responsibility. The Tonight Appearance adventure became one of the best beheld clips in the show's history, not because of the celebrity or the ball value, but because bodies admit article accurate in an apple that generally feels manufactured. It reminded admirers that abaft every accessible amount is an animal actuality able of actuality moved, of actuality changed, of actuality fabricated bigger by encountering absolute courage. Jimmy Fallon kept a photo of Miguel on his board for the blow of his career. Not as an admonition of acceptable television, but as an admonition of the moment a back television chock full actuality about ball and became about article added important, animal connection. The custom watch that Kevin had fabricated for Miguel was active with him, but Kevin had a like fabricated for himself. He wore it accustomed for the blow of his life, not as jewelry, but as an admonition of a little boy who had accomplished him that actuality someone's hero isn't about the roles you comedy on screen. It's about assuming up a back absolute activity gets hard. About actuality adventurous abundant to be vulnerable, about compassionate that sometimes the best important admirers is an admirers of one. Share and subscribe. Make abiding this adventure is never forgotten. Miguel's mother still receives an agenda from Kevin Coer every year on her son's birthday. Not a all-encompassing accord card, but a claimed agenda administration, an anamnesis of Miguel. An adventure about how her son's adventuresomeness continues to affect him. A admonition that adulation doesn't end a back activity does. The Aboriginal watch, the one Kevin had spontaneously accustomed to Miguel that night on The Tonight Show, was alternate to him afterwards the funeral. He keeps it in a abode of account in his home, not as a memento, but as an admonition of the night a 10-year-old boy accomplished him the aberration amid arena a hero and actuality one. And sometimes backward at night a back Kevin Coer is disturbing with a difficult accommodation or adverse his own fears. He holds that watch and remembers 7 simple words that afflicted his life. My amoroso said, "You were Superman." He remembers that actuality someone's hero isn't about actuality absolute or fearless. It's about assuming up, about caring, about actuality adventurous abundant to let your affection breach for addition else's pain. The assignment Miguel accomplished that night in the Tonight Appearance flat is simple but profound. We never apperceive whose hero we ability be. We never apperceive who is watching us, acquirements from us, accolade adventuresomeness in our stories. And sometimes the greatest account we can accept is not an accolade or recognition, but the simple words of an adolescent who sees us as we achievement to be, brave, caring, and aces of trust. Because that's what adulation looks like. That's what adventuresomeness sounds like. And that's what happens aback a 10-year-old boy reminds a cine brilliant that the best important role anyone can comedy is artlessly actuality human. The microphone that slipped from Jimmy Fallon's Duke that night was best up oral seconds. But the impulse of what happened aback Kevin Coer chock full actuality and amateur and started actuality animal actuality continues to resonate, reminding us all that sometimes the greatest performances appear not on screen, but in the quiet moments aback we accept to appearance up for addition who needs us. In the end, Miguel got his wish. He met his hero. But what he gave in acknowledgement was so abundant greater. He reminded Kevin Coer, Jimmy Fallon, and millions of admirers that boldness isn't about the admeasurement of your date or the ambit of your story. Sometimes it's as simple as an ancestor watching movies with his ailing son, a boy accustomed his father's bulletin to his hero, and a man allotment to kneel bottomward and attending an adolescent in the eye aback it would accept been easier to break on stage. That's the absolute story. That's the accuracy that lives above the cameras and the lights and the applause. That's what happens aback a child's acknowledgement doesn't aloof leave a flat in tears, but changes hearts and reminds us all what it absolutely agency to be brave.